Elena Martinez used to believe in miracles. She believed them in the way a poor girl clung to fairy tales, whispering them to herself when the world was too cruel, when her tiny apartment leaked rainwater and her stomach growled from skipped meals. Her biggest miracle had a name: Adrian Roswell. He was the CEO of Roswell Corporation, heir to one of the wealthiest families in the city. Cold, untouchable, magnetic, Adrian was the kind of man who turned heads when he entered a room. He ruled the markets with precision, his eyes always a shade too sharp, his heart hidden behind an impenetrable mask. To Elena, who worked as nothing more than a timid intern, Adrian was more than a man. He was a dream. She had convinced herself that perhaps, if she worked hard enough, if she proved herself worthy, he might one day see her, not as the invisible girl delivering reports, but as someone capable of standing by his side. For a while, she thought she saw glimmers of something. He had once smiled when she nervously dropped a stack of files. He had spoken her name in a boardroom, his voice lingering as though it mattered. But dreams shattered easily. The day Vivian Lancaster returned, Elena's fragile hope was crushed. Vivian was Adrian's first love, the glamorous heiress who had once left him for a wealthier suitor, only to reappear when her marriage collapsed in scandal. With Vivian back, Adrian's walls melted. His icy gaze warmed, his lips curved into smiles Elena had never seen. Suddenly, he was no longer the untouchable CEO. He was a man in love, and Elena was invisible again. At the annual Roswell Gala, Elena stood in the corner, wearing a plain black dress she could barely afford. She watched Adrian escort Vivian down the grand staircase, the cameras flashing, the crowd sighing at how perfect they looked together. "They're meant to be," someone whispered beside her. "Vivian has always been his match," another voice said. The words dug into Elena's heart. She slipped away before the champagne toast, tears blurring her vision. That night, as she sat alone in her apartment, Elena made a vow. She would never beg for anyone's attention again. She would stop waiting for Adrian Roswell to notice her. She would stop being small. She would build herself into someone impossible to ignore. Leaving Roswell Corporation was the hardest step, but it was also the first of many. Elena worked tirelessly, moving through smaller firms where she wasn't afraid to voice her ideas. She studied markets late into the night, networking, investing, learning how to turn every setback into strategy. She charmed investors not with privilege but with grit and brilliance. And she fought. Every obstacle reminded her of Adrian's cold dismissal, of Vivian's smirk, of the whispers that had once mocked her. That anger fueled her, shaping her into a sharper version of herself. Years passed. By 29, Elena Martinez was no longer the poor intern. She was the founder and CEO of Artemis Holdings, a private equity powerhouse with assets spanning tech, media, and luxury brands. Her face graced magazines. Journalists called her the Iron Rose, beautiful, brilliant, unyielding. But Elena carried another secret. Her son, Matteo, 2 years old, with dark curls and storm-gray eyes. The world didn't know his father's name, and Elena never told. To the public, she was the perfect picture of a self-made billionaire and devoted single mother. But in the quiet of her penthouse, holding Matteo as he laughed in her arms, Elena knew the truth. His eyes were Adrian Roswell's. The memory was etched into her soul. One night, years ago, when Adrian had been shattered by Vivian's rejection. He had sought comfort, and Elena, foolish, lovesick Elena, had given him everything. He never remembered it as more than a fleeting mistake, but to her, it had changed everything. And now, the boy with his father's eyes was the reason she had built her empire. For Matteo, she had clawed her way out of obscurity. Elena thought she was free of Adrian, that she could build her life far away from him, until fate pulled them back together. Because Artemis Holdings' next acquisition target was none other than Roswell Corporation. The boardroom was silent when Elena entered. She wore an emerald silk dress that clung to her curves, her heels clicking with authority. No longer timid, no longer invisible, she commanded the room. The directors stared at her with awe, and at the head of the table sat Adrian Roswell. He rose slowly, his eyes locking on hers. For a man known for never showing emotion, he faltered, just slightly. "Elena Martinez," he said, his voice low, deliberate. "I didn't expect to see you again." Her smile was poised, but her heart hammered. "Clearly, you never expected much from me at all." The board exchanged uneasy glances. Adrian dismissed them with a wave of his hand, leaving the two of them alone. For a long moment, silence filled the room. You've changed, Adrian finally said. No, Elena replied coolly. I've simply stopped waiting for people to see me. Something flickered in his eyes, regret, maybe even longing. But Elena didn't flinch. She was not the girl who once cried in the shadows of his gala. Her phone buzzed on the table. A picture lit up the screen. Matteo, giggling with his favorite toy. Elena's expression softened unconsciously. Adrian's gaze darkened. He picked up the phone before she could stop him. His eyes widened as he studied the boy's face, those familiar gray eyes staring back at him. Elena, his voice cracked. Who is he? My son. The resemblance hit him like a blow. Memories surged. The night of weakness, the heat of her arms, the comfort he had buried. He's mine. His words were raw, almost desperate. Elena snatched the phone back, her jaw tight. No, he's mine. You don't get to claim him now. You should have told me, Adrian growled. And what? Elena snapped. So you could parade Vivian around while I raised a child in the shadows. So you could throw me a crumb of attention out of obligation. No, Adrian, I built everything, for him. Not for you. Her voice broke, but her resolve didn't. Adrian rose, circling the table, his usual control unraveling. I was blind, Elena. I let my past blind me. But I see you now. And I see him. Let me make it right. Elena's eyes burned with unshed tears. For years, she had imagined this moment, Adrian realizing her worth. But now, standing in front of him, she felt only exhaustion. You can't erase the years I raised him alone, she whispered. You can't erase how you ignored me, how you chose her. Adrian's expression softened, stripped of power and arrogance. For the first time, he looked not like a CEO, but like a man desperate for redemption. Then let me try, he said quietly. For you, for Matteo. Elena turned away, her hands trembling. She had dreamed of him saying those words, but the girl who once loved him blindly no longer existed. She was stronger now, wiser, harder. If Adrian Roswell wanted a place in her world, he would have to prove it, through action, not words. She gathered her things and walked to the door. This isn't about you anymore, Adrian. If you want to be part of Matteo's life, you'll have to earn it. Not from me, from him. As she left, Matteo's laughter echoed faintly from her phone, bright and innocent. Adrian stood alone in the boardroom, the weight of his choices crushing him. For the first time in his life, power and money meant nothing. He had lost Elena once. He would not lose her, or their son, again. And Elena, walking away with her head high, knew the game was no longer about being seen. Now, it was about who was strong enough to stay. In the gleaming towers of Roswell Corporation, where sharp suits and sharper tongues ruled, she was only the timid intern, clutching files too big for her arms, blending into the background. She dressed in plain skirts and second-hand shoes, her soft voice drowned out by the chatter of executives. But no matter how hard the city tried to make her small, Elena's heart belonged to one man. Adrian Roswell, the young CEO, was ruthless, brilliant, and untouchable. His reputation for coldness was as legendary as his flawless looks. Women admired him, men envied him, the press adored him. Adrian's sharp gaze never lingered long on anyone, and yet, on rare occasions, Elena had seen him soften, a faint smile when she stumbled, a pause when she presented her ideas. Those tiny moments had been enough for her naive heart to weave a dream. But dreams shattered easily. The night of the Roswell Gala, Elena stood quietly near the marble staircase, helping with logistics. She wore a plain black dress bought from a discount rack, her hair pinned back simply. She didn't expect to be noticed. And she wasn't, because that was the night Vivian Lancaster returned. Vivian, Adrian's first love, the heiress who had once abandoned him for another man. She was dazzling in red silk, her laughter like champagne bubbles. The moment Adrian saw her, his icy eyes melted. He crossed the room, offered her his arm, and the photographers lit them in gold as if they were royalty. Whispers filled the hall. They're perfect together. Vivian has always been the only one who matched him. Elena's throat tightened as she watched. In that moment, she realized the truth. She had never been seen. Not really. Adrian Roswell had never noticed her heart beating in the shadows. So she slipped away before the champagne toast, her dreams dissolving with every step. That night, Elena cried for the last time. And when the sun rose, she made a vow. Never again would she wait for scraps of attention. Never again would she be small. She left Roswell Corporation without looking back. And the world pushed her harder than she could have imagined. There were nights when she couldn't afford rent, when she skipped meals so she could pay for books on finance and markets. There were days when investors slammed doors in her face, dismissing her as a pretty girl with nothing to offer. But Elena fought. She studied. She networked. She took risks others were too cautious to try. Step by step, she climbed. And then one risk changed everything. An investment no one believed in soared, and suddenly doors began to open. She built a small firm into a powerhouse. She charmed the world not with privilege, but with grit, brilliance, and vision. 3 years later, Elena Martinez was no longer invisible. She was the founder of Artemis Holdings, a billionaire in her own right, celebrated as a self-made success. The world called her the Iron Rose, beautiful, resilient, untouchable. But Elena's greatest treasure wasn't her empire. It was her son, Matteo. 2 years old, with soft curls and storm gray eyes that mirrored the man she once loved. The world didn't know his father's name, and Elena never spoke of it. She raised Matteo with fierce devotion, whispering to him the promises she once whispered to herself: "You will never be invisible. You will always be enough." For 3 years, Adrian Roswell was only a memory, a wound that had healed into steel. Until the day Elena signed the papers to acquire her next target, Roswell Corporation. Part 2. Return of the Iron Rose. The boardroom stilled when she entered. Elena wore emerald silk that shimmered against her skin, her heels clicking in command. No longer the timid intern, she was the woman who could buy the empire that once ignored her. The directors whispered, awestruck. And at the head of the table, Adrian Roswell rose to his feet. For a man known for control, he faltered. His eyes widened, and for the first time in years, he looked shaken. "Elena Martinez," he said, her name rolling off his tongue as though he'd never truly spoken it before. "I didn't expect to see you again." Her lips curved into a blade-sharp smile. "No, you never expected much of me at all." Gasps rippled across the room. Adrian dismissed the board with a flick of his hand, leaving them alone. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. "You've changed," he finally said. "No," Elena replied smoothly. "I've simply stopped waiting for people to notice me." He studied her, regret flickering in his eyes. She was radiant, commanding, nothing like the girl he once overlooked. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down, and her expression softened. A small boy's face filled the screen. Matteo, laughing with his toy car. Adrian's gaze froze. His breath caught. Who is he? His voice was low, dangerous. "My son." The words sliced through the air. Adrian's jaw tightened. He stared at the child's face, those familiar gray eyes, the same ones that looked back at him in the mirror each morning. "Elena," his voice cracked. Don't." She cut him off, her tone sharp with years of pain. "You don't get to claim him now. You don't get to look at my child after ignoring me, after choosing her." Adrian stood, circling the table, his control unraveling. "You should have told me." "And what?" Elena's laugh was bitter. "So you could choose me out of obligation? So you could parade Vivian while I raised a baby in silence?" "No, Adrian. Matteo is mine. Everything I built, Artemis Holdings, this empire, it's for him. Not for you. Never for you." Her words struck deep. Adrian, the man who had always had the world at his feet, suddenly looked stripped of power. His voice was raw. "I was blind," he admitted. "I let my past chain me. But I see you now, Elena. And I see him. Let me make it right." Tears pricked her eyes, but Elena lifted her chin. She wouldn't crumble. "Not now. You can't erase the years I raised him alone," she whispered. "You can't erase the girl you ignored." Adrian stepped closer, his arrogance gone. "Then let me prove I've changed. Not for me, for him, for Matteo." Elena studied him, torn between the scars of betrayal and the fragile spark of hope. For years, she had dreamed of him seeing her worth. But she was not the same girl anymore. She was Elena Martinez, the Iron Rose, a billionaire, a mother. And if Adrian Roswell wanted a place in her world, he would have to fight for it. She turned toward the door, her voice steady. "This isn't about us anymore. If you want to be in his life, you'll have to earn it, from him, not from me." As she walked away, Matteo's laughter echoed faintly from her phone. Adrian stood alone, stripped of everything but the determination blazing in his chest. For the first time in his life, power meant nothing. He had lost Elena once. He would not lose her, or their son, again. And Elena, head held high, realized something even stronger. She no longer needed Adrian Roswell to see her. Because the world already did,